welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse, the podcast where we talk about movies that will do absolutely nothing for our SEO because no one has talked about them in 15 years. I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller. I mean, did it really matter what I said there? Is anyone going to listen to an episode about Doom, the motion picture?
Unless we could find a way to, lie in the title convincingly. I really don't think so.
I mean, I still get compliments about that Wrinkle in Time bit with the hurricane heist, which was, I believe, your idea. So they're misplaced compliments. But
okay, well, all right, hang on. Can we talk about anything else for 5 minutes? Have you watched anything else in the last week?
Just Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
That's a good anime.
It's a great anime. I'm not that far, but I really am impressed with the way that, because I watched the 2003 version first, because I didn't watch either as a kid, and I'm kind of on my list of anime classics that I'm going through. And, obviously everyone says Brotherhood's the good one, but I'm like, well, is 2003 worth watching? So, I went through and I got people's opinions, and there are some people who simp hard for the weird stuff in 2003, but mostly everyone's just like, nah, Brotherhood's good. But you should watch 2003 anyway, because Brotherhood kind of assumes that you've seen it in the beginning. But what I find really impressive about Brotherhood is how, in those first 7 episodes, I don't know if I would have known the difference. I would have just thought the show was really tight in the way that, it introduces things. We're at episode 7 in Brotherhood to a place that it took 2003 20 episodes to get to. Shit's impressive. Shit's well done.
The manga, I read a bunch of the manga as a kid, was also very tight in that way. And I think that translates well to Brotherhood. It's just that this is what you need to know. We're going to give you the basics to understand what you want to know. And then we're going to move past it. And I think that's really effective storytelling and really efficient storytelling.
Yeah, 2003 was very not tight in that way. The pacing was kind of all over the place. And sometimes that was okay for the show. There were some fillery episodes that were fun.
I don't think there's a single filler episode in Brotherhood, honestly.
I would hope not, considering they made the show with the express purpose of following the manga to the letter.
Yeah, it does so very well. It's a great fucking anime.
Oh, if you want to be even more SEO friendly, I've also been watching Attack on Titan, which has gotten delayed thanks to an earthquake. So
I saw that. Yeah, that's a bummer.
Hopefully all the friends in Japan, all our Japanese fans, hopefully you're doing all right over there. But Attack on Titan, I think it's sick. I know there's discourse, and I'm still open to it ending badly. But I think a lot of the discourse has been reductive. I think it's great. If it sticks the landing, it might be one of my favorite shows of all time.
I haven't caught up on it, mostly because I watched season 1 when it came out, and then had a 5-year wait to get to season 2, which was fairly disappointing, and just have not gone back to 3 and 4. And I know you keep telling me that I really need to, and I plan to at some point, but that 5-year wait between 1 and 2 was so demoralizing when 2 hit and was just okay. Season 1 was so fucking high octane and great, and then season 2 was pretty mediocre, and I'm I waited 5 years for this. I was so agitated and here's where I'm at with my life once again, in that I tend to just go off and do my own fucking thing and have no one to talk to, because when I watch Attack on Titan, I begged you and our other roommate to watch this so I could talk about someone with it. And then both of you did 3 years later. I'm you guys fucking suck. And I'm off in my own little world. I'm reading One Piece and having the time of my goddamn life. I'm tweeting about Blaseball all the time. Hey, if you're in the audience and you're listening to this and you know about Blaseball, come at me. I want to talk about it. Go the Ohio Worms. Yeah, baby. Our fucking stadium is foul. It's misery. But we're doing okay this season, though, right? I mean, we're not doing great, but I really think the fact that we did get that 5% boost at the end of the last season probably helped us out a little bit. And I mean, I'm curious to see what's going on with the Ego Plus boost. I'm really excited about Pitching Machine and seeing where he goes now, or they go, I guess they're a pitching machine, and seeing where they go in the league and like seeing how that plays out. Plus the fact that, you know, the boss, the overseers or whatever are gone and left that squid thing to watch over the stadiums as it's all happening and renovations are happening right now. It's a really exciting time in Blaseball, and I want to talk to people about it, but no one else talks about it. Jackson thought I was doing a bit while I've been tweeting this whole time, and no, it's an actual thing. And now we can talk. We can put Blaseball, Full Metal Alchemist, and Attack on Titan in the title, and we're good to go.
I mean, with the exception of Blaseball, I think all of those things would get more traction than. I mean, we can try and trick them in that we're talking about Doom, like the game series, because we have done games on this show before. That would get more attention.
I do just have to defend Blaseball because I promise it's actually a surprisingly big deal on the internet. Like it's a small but very passionate community.
I mean, look, when you were describing Blaseball to me, like I felt this kind of existential horror, and the existential horror was this. It was like, I now understand the perspective of every other human being when I talk to them about anything. Like when I was floating down the lazy river at Colossal Con and just reciting the entire plot of Game of Thrones to those Chads who had only seen like 2 episodes, that's what they were hearing, was your Blaseball explanation.
That's fair, honestly. That's kind of where I'm at with Blaseball too. It is a wild thing, but more people should join me. But unfortunately, we do need to talk about Doom, I guess.
Are you sure you don't want to take the opportunity? You have the pulpit. You could extol the viewers with Blaseball. You could try and get some converts here.
I mean, there's no real. Did I convert you at all? Do you have any interest in it at all?
I mean, a little bit. There was a little, like, I think mostly like it's interesting in a way. Like I kind of fear it.
Yeah, I mean, that, honest to God, that is the way to describe Blaseball, because I also kind of fear it, because I am understanding what it's like to be a sports fan all of a sudden, and why people pick teams that they like and everything, and like, just, you know what? I don't like the stakes. Why? Because I'm a vegetarian. That is my entire reason. I will never bet on the stakes because I'm like, they're meat and I don't eat meat. And that's sports, baby. That's how that works, I guess.
So Doom is a film that came out in 2005 starring The Rock, based off of the Doom series of video games.
Yes, it is. It is loosely based off the first Doom in a lot of ways. It's kind of a prequel to that, and explores what happens on the Mars base with UAC and everything going on. You really don't need to know much about Doom to watch Doom, beyond the fact that it is like this weird pseudo-action horror movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Rosamund Pike, and Keith Urban.
Carl Urban.
Keith Urban is the country singer.
Yes.
Carl Urban is the gentleman who I think is a country singer. Carl Urban. And they go into space and fight aliens, demons, hellspawn things. You don't need to know much about it. It's not really a movie I would recommend to most people, honestly.
Here was about my metric for Doom, is that about like 5 or 10 minutes in, I picked up my Game Boy and was like, all right, I'm going to play Pokemon and like, you know, have Doom in my peripheral vision. But I'll put down the Game Boy if I see something that that threatens to be interesting. And to be fair, the nicest thing I could say about Doom is that I did put down the Game Boy a couple of times.
That's totally fair. And I said that I would struggle to recommend Doom, and I really would for a vast majority of people. But if you are the type of person who just likes watching bad science fiction movies on a Saturday afternoon, boy, do I have a Doom 2005 for you. It is genuinely perfect for that type of viewing experience, because it is by and large, horrendously boring, but has moments where you're like, oh, wow, that was kind of interesting or unique or whatever. These parts that are interesting or unique are actually when they're talking, which kind of feels antithetical to Doom, and we'll talk about why in a little bit here. It's weird, but you're gonna get some good fun out of it if you're playing Pokemon while you're watching it or whatever and just sitting on the couch and half paying attention. I watched it the entire time and walked away going like, so absolutely nothing happened in that movie, because nothing really did happen in that movie.
So, the thing I'll say about Doom is that I feel like it's at basically every time I put down the Game Boy and watched it, I came away thinking like, if the movie had committed to this bit, it would have been a lot more fun or interesting. I feel like there were a lot of routes you could take with Doom 2005, and it doesn't commit to any single one. And I think that's ultimately the problem. It's not as funny as Resident Evil. It's not as like idiosyncratic as like, I mean, Sean and I were just talking about Hardcore Henry. We might do that on the fucking show because I was thinking about, I mean, this isn't really a spoiler because this is the most infamous bit in the whole movie. There is a bit that takes place in first person. That was the only thing I knew about the movie going in. And it's decent memes, but it did make me think that like, imagine if they had committed to the bit and made a first-person shooter movie. And I'm like, oh, wait, they did that. It was called Hardcore Henry. We should watch that and see if it's garbage.
If it's anything like the first-person bit in this, it's going to be absolute trash, because somehow the first-person bit, which should have been the most interesting bit in the entire movie because it is at least doing something new and unique, was the most... I don't know how long that was. It couldn't have been longer than 2 minutes, but it felt like a solid 15. It was horrendously dull.
It really was. When I was doing like a minimum amount of reading about the movie, I didn't do much, but I did see that Roger Ebert described the movie as, now famously, I'm not a gamer. Don't play video games, but I don't need to be to critique Doom on that metric, because watching Doom feels like you're going to your little brother's house and he just won't give you the controller and it's just making you watch the entire time. And that's the first person scene. It really does feel like you're watching someone play a video game, or like a terrible like light gun game cutscene, like a Time Crisis cutscene.
But watching a Time Crisis cutscene is interesting because of the light gun mechanic to it.
Yeah.
And, like, you can see like people reacting and moving around like this. This is very like watching somebody play a video game poorly is a really good explanation for it, because despite the fact that theoretically the first person is playing it entirely perfectly, like it is a flawless sequence and that's the whole point of it, it feels like nothing is happening at all in it. Like you're just watching somebody struggle to make a jump in Mario. You're just like, I can feel my fingernails growing right now. That's what that's what the first person sequence feels like.
Yeah, why was the final boss? I guess it wasn't actually the final boss, but I feel like, oh man, I guess we would technically have to call spoilers on this, because what I was about to say is like, actually the only genuinely interesting in the movie is what I was about to say. So I guess we do have to call spoilers eventually, but I'll put a tab in that. The opponent that he fights in the first person sequence at the end, that he spends most of his time struggling against, is a very minor bit character, like at the beginning.
There's a payoff to that. Do you know about that character's namesake?
No.
Okay. There is a payoff to it. We will talk about that in spoilers a little bit here. So some context, just because we're about to get into this. I know a surprising amount about Doom. I have it's a weird passion of mine, despite the fact that I really just fell into it last year. It was on the eShop on the Nintendo Switch for like $1.50. I'm like, I'll pick it up and play it. I didn't like it much when I played it on PC, mostly because I found out it is basically designed to be a twin stick shooter and is fucking fantastic as a twin stick shooter. From there, I kind of just continued to explore around. I played Doom 2016 way back when, loved that. Have lots of thoughts about Doom Eternal. If you have if you want to talk about Doom Eternal, I will talk about Doom Eternal until the fucking sun comes up. I have so many thoughts about Doom Eternal.
I was low key ready in case we didn't have enough to say about the Doom film to tell Sean, like, all right, Sean, you've been looking for a public place to air your Doom Eternal thoughts. Let her rip, boy. You take the floor on this one. That was my contingency plan in case we didn't have enough to talk about.
There is a little bit that I could talk about in regards to Doom Eternal and this movie. I'm going to stay away from it because I feel like it's better to compare it to Doom 2016 in a lot of ways, because there are actual spoilers for Doom Eternal, whereas Doom 2016 is literally just rip and tear until the job is done. So I'm not as worried about spoiling that. But there are comparisons to be made with Doom Eternal, mostly in how it handles Doom Guy and the personification therein. So yeah, obviously I have thoughts about this, but I've also like read a Masters of Doom book, so like I have a really good idea of like the culture around id at the time. I do recommend it if you have any interest in reading about like the creation of Doom and id and first person shooters around that time. It's a really great read. It came out in like 2002, and there is like half a page of weird transphobia in it, but if you can get past that, the rest of the book is deeply fascinating despite, you know, the 2002 of it all. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, this is all just to say that I have a lot of context for this movie that Jackson does not. And I would say that probably a lot of people don't in 2021. Like, I feel like Doom, especially the culture of the 90s era of Doom, is so far foregone that I don't know how many people would recognize this. Like, at one point, I got really mad at the movie because they referenced one of the developers in a way. And I'm like, yes, everyone knows this. I get it. It's fucking stupid. Move on. And Sam just like, Sean, no one knows this. What the fuck are you talking about? What are you saying? Everyone knows this. You are the only person who knows this. And I'm like, that's actually fair.
My favorite thing about that statement is I can imagine exactly how she said that to you, too. I am watching that scene like play out like I feel like I'm looking through a portal back in time, like how you are both interacting there.
I mean, you're pretty much seeing it exactly as it played out, because I got very passionate about it because I'm like, this is stupid. And she's like, Sean, what the fuck are you on about?
Oh, that's really good. Oh boy, what a meme. No, I mean, Doom is an interesting franchise because it is one of those series that has had, I feel like this is more common than maybe I originally thought, but Doom is a series with very distinct eras, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
You got kind of the classic era when it was at the peak of like its cultural relevance, I guess, because like that would have been, you know, around the controversy, like it was one of the big like groundbreaking first person shooters. So, you know, not to say anything bad about like, you know, the games that came after it, but like that probably was like the peak of, you know, Doom as a culture, like what we think of, right? And then you have Doom 3, which I know a lot less about because it doesn't get talked about as much, because in hindsight, because the modern games, like design wise, are kind of purposefully seeking to blend the old style and like, you know, give it a fresh take, whereas Doom 3 was a lot more of a serious like horror game, I think.
Doom 3 is the one that I have not played at this point. I technically haven't played Doom 2 as well, but I played Doom 1 and Doom 64, which are like the big ones, the paragons, as well as Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, obviously. Doom 3 is currently downloading as we talk, so I will be playing Doom 3 and will report back with thoughts.
I remember even back in the day, like I had friends that played Doom 3. Like Doom 3 was really popular. Like I don't know how people feel about it now. I feel like some people really still stand for it, but I think generally the consensus seems to be that time has not been kind to it, and we're glad that like 2016 sort of rewrote the book. But yeah, I mean that just basically brings us to like modern Doom, which is, you know, it's a big gaming franchise, but partially because it's like a throwback and like a reimagining. So like it is a little interesting, I think, to think about that this is a movie that apparently takes a lot of cues from the classics, but definitely looks and feels like the Doom 3 era. I just assumed this was like straight up an adaptation of Doom 3 without any of that outside context.
I don't know if it is or not. I do know that Doom 3 is essentially a retelling of Doom 1 as well, but I don't know how much of it is Doom 3 and how much of it is its own retelling of Doom, because this came out only a year after Doom 3. Doom 3 came out in 2004. This came out in 2005. And like, I don't know what the turnaround on the film time was or anything like that. Like, I couldn't tell you what month either of those came out and whether it'd be feasible. Like, oh, it was a year and a half. That's a reasonable time frame to knock out something, or what's going on with that. As I said, I have not played Doom 3 yet. I'm very curious to, with all this context. Also, if you are a fan of Doom or if you aren't a fan of Doom, neither of those things matter if you want to watch Doom 2005. None of it fucking matters. Watch Doom 2005 if you want to.
I mean, yeah, I guess if we're going to move into spoilers, my gut reaction is just to say that, like, I probably wouldn't recommend Doom 2005, despite the fact it did occasionally get me to drop the Game Boy, just because I think that, like, on most other metrics, like, every time I dropped the Game Boy, I was thinking about another movie. I'm like, oh, this is schlock trash like Resident Evil, but Resident Evil's a lot funnier because it's got Milla Jovovich doing kung fu and shit like that. So I did not particularly enjoy my time with Doom 2005. It did have one or two elements that were super interesting, but not enough for me to recommend.
I would pretty much agree with Jackson on that across the board, with the exception of if you are looking for something to watch on a Saturday and you're planning on doing a puzzle or playing a video game on your Switch or whatever at the same time, it's fine for that. It is just interesting enough that it will pass the time without taking full command of your attention if you want to do something else at the same time. So
I think I'm learning, because I think if I had tried to watch this, like, it was real early on, like 10 or 15 minutes in. I'm like, okay, I gotta do something else while I'm watching this. I think if I had tried to, like, give it my full attention, I would have gone insane. Because big chunks of the movie are pretty fucking boring.
I am stupid enough that I did give it my whole attention the entire fucking time. Mostly in part because whenever we do anything, unless it is just miserably hard to watch, I actively try and pay attention the entire time. And I think that Jackson's approach is entirely valid. And I think it brings a lot to the conversation. But I'm like, if I'm going to watch this, I want to give it what it's due. And I mean, what Doom is due is to half pay attention to it. But I was like, no, I'm going to focus the entire time.
Your approach is certainly more professional. Like my approach is basically like, people got mad at me for dropping Silent Hill 2. So like, I need a way.
I'm mostly mad at you about it because I was sick. I was sick.
Well, you're mad because of that. The viewers are mad because I chickened out. So everyone was mad at me, but basically, like, when I do that, that's like, you know, that's the extension of my philosophy of like, all right, I'm already so bored. I would have turned this off if I didn't have to nominally watch this for the podcast.
That's totally fair. I'm too stupid to turn things off is mostly my problem.
Well, no, I my approach kind of predicates you, like, actually doing the work. Essentially, like, I'm being a parasite, because whenever that happens, you always come with, like, more legitimate things to say. Like, so.
Wait, is that just saying that my tastes are trash because you're like over here like, yes, I got bored of this movie and did something else. Meanwhile, you, the plebeian, have come with things to say about Doom 2005.
That's not how I meant it at all.
It's
really funny to
you
think
wound
about.
me.
Sean, you're the hero. You're not the hero we deserve, but you're the one we need right now.
All right, let's get into spoilers. But before we do, as always, if you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Tell friends about us. It's the only way we grow. Leave us reviews on iTunes, all that good stuff. Next week, we're getting prepared for Monk versus Nuclear Reactor by watching both the original King Kong and Kong Skull Island, because that's part of the legacy of Kong versus Godzilla, and neither of us have seen the original King Kong, so it's going to be an interesting comparison piece. We also might just end up talking about one over the other. We'll see what happens.
Is Kong Skull Island Actually, don't answer this because I genuinely don't know. Is Kong Skull Island a remake again? Because when it came out, that's all I could think is that, like, the Peter Jackson version was not that long ago, but that was a pretty big movie. So I genuinely don't know if Kong Skull Island is another King Kong remake. And I know there's like a 70s remake too.
I don't know, so I can't answer it anyway.
Okay, good. All right. No, it should be good memes either way. Yeah, there was no way in hell I was going to suggest we watch the fucking Peter Jackson version because that movie's like 5 hours long.
Good God. At that point, we might as well just watch Justice League.
We live in a society.
Next week. Oh, I already said what we're doing next week.
Yeah, we're clowning on it.
Spoilers?
Spoilers. I will say, actually, in this case, one of the reasons I felt comfortable not giving it my all is that I think part of it is that, like, as a bigger Doom fan, it'd be like if we watched Dragon Ball Evolution, you know? Like, I feel like even if we both thought the movie was equally boring, like, just by the nature of the property that it's based on, I would have a lot more to say about it, you know?
No, that's totally fair. Honest to God, I almost texted you to be like, Jackson, I know for a fact you're going to have, like, 3 sentences to say about this movie. Don't worry, I can carry it because I have a lot to say about it.
Well, do you want me to get my 3 sentences over with? Because there is one thing that I thought the movie was maybe doing that was genuinely almost like bold and brash. But then when Sean told me some Doom lore, I realized it wasn't doing that at all.
We'll do that in 1 second. I think before we get into that, I just want to explain what you were getting at with that boss fight.
Oh, yeah.
So the character that they were fighting, that Keith Urban was fighting, was by the name... Shut up, I know.
I wasn't sure if you were doing a bit if you forgot.
I don't know why that was so harsh. I was like trying to play into the bit there a little bit, and then, like, instead it just sounded like I was really mean. I'm sorry. I was actively trying to, like, roll with the bit and, like, yeah, I know, but, like, instead I'm just like, shut the fuck up. I know what I'm talking about.
Anyways, so Keith Chesney fights a demon.
Keith Chesney fights a demon who was like this dude. He got his butt cut off going through this arc portal thing. Don't worry too much about it. But he ends up turning into a demon, and his nickname throughout the movie, with no context ever given, is Pinky. If you are a fan of Doom, that name should immediately raise some alarm bells. If you're not, as Jackson isn't, you don't know why. I knew that he was going to turn into a monster because pinkies are those things that are like big and lumbering with like the little legs that like walk up to you and try and bite you. So when he turned into a monster, it was not surprising at all. Why it was him, I have literally no fucking clue, and it was very dumb in that regard. But it was set up, and it was kind of in lore.
Sure, that makes sense. So I guess, yeah, the one thing I was getting at with how it was weird that, like, that was the character he fought in first-person mode. Because the one thing that you probably could genuinely call a spoiler in this, although I guess, as Sean's informed me, this is also part of the lore, is that Rock the Dwayne Johnson, our man, criminally wasted here, because this was before everyone figured out that the best way to utilize Dwayne The Rock Johnson was the world's most muscular teddy bear. Mm-hmm.
He's scary, but you kind of want to hug him.
Yeah, this was still, I mean, it makes sense why they had him play like this hard ass like commando, because he came up as like a heel wrestler, didn't he? So
I have no idea.
So because he's kind of the, at least now, like, we perceive him as like the biggest star in the cast, right? Like, I thought our POV was him, and that's sort of supported because, like, of the main Marine squad, like, he comes out and informs them of the mission. Like, you kind of think The Rock's going to be the main character.
And I mean, that's even backed up in just like lore. Like, you look at that and think, okay, if anyone in this cast is Doom Guy, it is fucking The Rock.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not. It's Carl Urban, as you already said. And so The Rock's role in the story is to go crazy and want to murder everybody, basically. And
he goes full fashy, and you never go full fashy.
You never
go
full
any
fashy.
Fuck
Yeah.
fascists.
We don't want even a smidge fashy. That's flying too close to the sun even. But that's why, like, when The Rock started indiscriminately murdering people because he was trigger happy and just following orders, and I was still sitting here thinking that, like, he was our Doom guy POV, I was kind of like, oh, is this, like, actually a based, like, anti-video game movie about, like, is The Rock, like, our avatar of, like, his motivation is basically the default motivation of every, like, first-person shooter player? And there are plenty of, like, games that, this is a trope that has now become, like, pedestrian. But for a video game movie to do it, and do it well, like, could be cool.
Basically, you're proposing the "Would you kindly" of BioShock.
Yeah, basically. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, oh, like, done well in, like, a movie format, like, that's actually sort of, and especially because, like, as a game movie, it's like a spin-off of the main thing. Like, there's something to that, even if it's become kind of a tired trope today through overuse. Like, there's still something in 2005, if you're tasked to make a video game movie, that's kind of rebellious and subversive about that. Like, that resentment of, like, oh, I gotta make this stupid fucking video game movie, so I'm gonna make a movie about how, like, the average video game player is, like, an insane sociopath, and they love The Rock, and this is you. Now, granted, even if the movie was about this, I don't think it'd be especially interesting or well presented.
And I mean, we would still have some thoughts on that for sure.
For sure.
Given that neither of us agree with that sentiment. But
Of course. But it is, like, it is a potential avenue you could develop. However, tell them the thing you told me, because when you told me about another kind of deep cut Doom reference, that in my mind had sort of lent more credence to this position.
So one of the characters, quote unquote characters in this movie, because he is not really a character so much as he is just kind of a MacGuffin throughout most of the runtime of it, is a scientist who goes by the name Carmack. Yes, you may roll your eyes now. John Carmack, one of the two heads of id at the time, John Carmack and John Romero, the two Johns, before they split due to creative differences.
Solid and Liquid John.
Basically, in a lot of ways, though, yeah, there is some parallels there.
Because Romero went and made Daikatana, he's definitely Liquid.
He also was the one who tended to, like, gravitate towards being recognized as, like, a rock star, a video game dude.
Yeah.
He was way more into the theatrics, very much that, brother, it's been too long.
That's so good.
So there is something to be said there. Although Romero seems to be a pretty chill dude in general. But that's neither here nor there.
He's gotten kind of unfairly dunked on over the years because of Daikatana. Like, I've read quite a bit about that, actually. So
yeah, I mean, he just wanted to make a video game, and he just, like, overextended way too hard. Mostly because the relationship between John Carmack and John Romero was that John Carmack would develop the engine, and John Romero would basically take that engine and turn it into whatever. And so when they split, and John Romero went to work on Daikatana, Carmack debuted Quake 2, I think, at E3 around the same time that John Romero was talking about Daikatana, and their agreement on the split was that John Romero would be able to license the engines that John Carmack was making. And when they debuted Quake 2, again, I don't know if that's the exact game, but I think it was Quake 2, like, the whole thing was that there was lighting on the weapons and, like, the bullets that were getting shot out, and it was another, like, just giant leap forward. And John Romero basically said, fuck it, we have to just scrap everything we had done with Daikatana and start from scratch again in this new engine, because it's just so much more impressive. And that's basically why Daikatana sucked, was because John Romero basically had just had so much ambition around Daikatana that he flew too close to the sun in a lot of ways.
a classic tale, truly. We'd see it again with another 90s shooter franchise, in fact.
Yeah, no kidding. There's more than a couple of them that ended up doing that. So I have some respect for John Romero. I don't know much about him. Like, if somebody came and was like, oh, he's always a huge turf or something like that, I don't know that. So I'm couching what I'm saying in that regard. But He seems cool enough. John Carmack, who we're here to talk about, and it's weird that they chose John Carmack for this movie because John Carmack, as I said, was the engine guy and wasn't as concerned with like what was going on with the game beyond is it a game? Can you do stuff in it? And they even make a weird reference to John Carmack being like, the doctor in this is, I don't know what's wrong with him. He's usually emotionless and logical and and this is where I went, yeah, everyone fucking knows that. It's John Carmack, God damn it. And Sam's like, Sean, come on, really? Because that is just how John Carmack was. He was far less concerned with like the emotionality of video games and far more just about like understanding how computers work and how it all went together in the such. I mean, that's what he did. And John Romero was more about building the levels and creating an atmosphere and everything. So
when Sean informed me of this, because I didn't know that about John Carmack beyond, that he is one of the big boy like game designer names precisely for that reason. He tends to supersede the other people who worked on Doom as like the creator, I think, which is one of the reasons he's probably included here. When Sean informed me of that deep lore, I was like, oh, that made that stance of like, oh, this is an anti-game movie. Like that's even make it even deeper because that would go along with it. And that like, this is the architect of the Doom world, the architect of this experiment, this like emotionless man, not concerned with humanity and like just to create a little playground. And I'm like, oh man, like there's actually something to this. If they had made a not horribly boring movie,
Jackson opened his mouth to add one more sentence and I went, that's part of Doom lore.
I had no idea that The Rock was like an actual character in Doom lore. I'm finding that there's a lot of like actual Doom lore in this, which was surprising to me because unlike I kind of assumed this was like Resident Evil where like there were nods, but like, the story was basically completely different. I kind of assumed this was like that, which doesn't seem to be the case.
Yes and no in a lot of ways. And like, that's something that I really want to talk about because so the thing that Jackson was really focused in on was like, oh, if The Rock is Doom guy and he's going around just shooting people and just mindlessly following orders and, I got to go kill these humans because I was told to and all that good stuff, just shooting civilians. Yeah, I think that Jackson would have a really compelling case for it, except for the fact that the CO is a canon. I don't even want to call him a character because there's no character to the CO. I don't think that he ever even appears in game outside of like a brief little blurb somewhere. The CO is a character, is a being in the Doom universe who tells Doom Guy to shoot a bunch of civilians. And Doom Guy says no and assaults his CO and gets kicked out of the army. We stand an anti-fascist Doom Guy.
We stand let's
king. Go. So this is actual like Doom lore, and that's unfortunately why Jackson's whole thing falls apart.
That this is like that's when you said that, I was like, man, like I am 100% putting more thought into this than they did.
You almost had like a really big brain moment, and were I not such a fucking weirdo who knows Doom lore? A game that is ostensibly about not caring about lore. Like, I'm sorry, not even ostensibly. It is a game that actively says you don't give a fuck about lore. The game was designed with the idea of lore does not matter. We make a game first, we'll put a little bit of story in afterwards. John Carmack repeatedly, as people were pushing to add more story and more elements of that to their games, John Carmack was like, no, none of it fucking matters. All people want to do is shoot things. Don't add a bunch of weird story to it. And Romero was not one to necessarily disagree. I mean, he obviously started to when he went off to make Daikatana and flew too close to the sun. But I mean, the ethos of Doom is don't give a fuck about story, rip and tear until it is done. Period.
If John Romero and the Shenmue guy did the fusion dance, would the result be Peter Molyneux?
Yes, I think they would be, honestly.
Is anyone sure they're still around? Maybe that's what happened.
Has anybody checked in on Peter Molyneux? Is he okay?
Well, because Yu Suzuki had to come back to make Shenmue 3. So yeah, check on Peter Molyneux because maybe maybe the timer ran out and he split back into Ramiro and Yu Suzuki.
Yeah, that might explain some things, honestly. Anyway, the things about the Doom movie that are weird and from just a lore standpoint is how much they really tried to put in religious iconography into it. Because Doom has always been about shooting demons from hell, but that's pretty much it as far as the religious iconography goes. It's never been too concerned about like, oh, this plays into religion in this way or this way or this way. It was far more just shock value, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at all this hell stuff and look at these people being grody and embedded in the walls and skin and shit. And not about like, the dude who does the sign of the cross before killing himself or fucking carves a cross into his wrist in the middle of it,
that was buck wild.
Yeah. Sam looked over at me and my face was scrunched for like 30 seconds. She's like, what? And I'm like, this is nothing. This is absolutely less than nothing. What the fuck is going on here? So the religious iconography is this weird little thing that like they're trying to add in to give kind of like a bit of thematic resonance to the movie. I feel like, a battle of good versus evil. And I mean, that's personified even in Doom Guy because like as he's talking to his sister, heavy quotes on that because man, if there's ever been a Folgers commercial in a movie, it's Doom.
I have a special recommendation for all the anime fans, of a very particular brand to watch Doom 2005.
That was two very obsequious. Did I pronounce that right?
Obsequious, I think.
Obsequious, and I'm using this correctly.
I'm not sure about that part, actually. I don't know, legitimately.
We're gonna take a minute here to learn a word altogether. No, it means obedient. For some reason, I always thought it meant like irrelevant or something like that. So, hey, we're all learning things today.
The more you know.
Those are two very absurd and niche references to say that these two siblings definitely give the vibe that they fucking the whole time, and it is very uncomfortable and weird.
I am like 90% certain that Rosamund Pike's character was written to be the love interest, but like at some point in development was changed to be his sister, and I don't know why they would do that. Otherwise, the only explanation, I mean, there's three explanations. There's either that the writer was just a buffoon who doesn't have a sibling and like doesn't know how siblings actually act, or the writer's got like a weird thing. Those are the only explanation.
When fucking Blake Shelton was like, oh, I have demons back up on Mars, I'm definitely like, okay, so it's his ex-wife. Like, that's what we're going for here.
Yeah.
But no, it's his sister and his family died up there or whatever. And like the family dying part, sure. But like the fact that it's his sister is fucking wild.
And because they like call attention to it too, because the one guy is like, damn, like you left behind such a babe on Mars. And she's like, it's my sister. So like they're playing into it for a bit. Did they change it just so they could do the bit? I feel like that's something they might do for this movie, considering some of the other cringeworthy like mid 2000s bits that are in here.
Yeah, there's definitely some cringe shit in here, and I would not be shocked myself in that regard. The point that I'm making here more than anything is that like they're definitely trying to go with like a good versus evil motif, and like people who get infected with this 24th chromosome, don't think about it, don't worry about it, can either turn evil and turn into demons or get like superpowers and be good. And like at one point, goddamn Keith Shelton was like, I've definitely done horrible things, and his sister lover is like, but it's okay. I can tell that you're innately good, and injects him with this 24th chromosome. Again, don't think about it, don't question it, and he turns into Doom Guy, and that's where we get the first person shooter sequence. So like, there's definitely trying to do something there, and it doesn't exist in Doom in any way, shape, or form. But you know what does do adding things to Doom that didn't prior exist in any way, shape, or form before? Doom 2016, where Doom 2016 basically said, hey, because we've come so far from the original Doom, we actually need to give like some sort of context or story to this world, just to give some sort of like driving force. Like, it would feel weird if it wasn't there, and it wouldn't necessarily be Doom, because then it would feel like more like an arcade thing, and Doom never really was an arcade game. It was more of a linear progression, but we've come to expect some sort of story or connective tissue in linear progressing games beyond you leave that area, you get to this area, it's also fucked, go kill some things of the original Doom games. And so what they did was they added some new stuff to it, like the energy going on there, Argent energy. Samuel Hayden, they made it like way more apparent that they're mining hell and there's an energy crisis on Earth. And like there's a bunch of really interesting stuff going on there that they do kind of explore a bit more in Doom Eternal. But Doom 2016, literally, the Doom guy does not give a hot fuck about the story and just really exudes the energy that exists within the original Doom. By the scene that always is in my head is Samuel Hayden, this robot dude, appears on a thing just like, oh, you've reawoken and now this is what's happening. And before he even gets like 3 sentences out, the Doom Slayer punches a hole in the monitor, takes a gun out, and walks away. And like, that's how you add story to Doom while still channeling the ethos of Doom, in that there's a story there and it's enough of a driving force to move you forward, but you're not supposed to care about it. And so in Doom 2005, they're like, but what if we add like angels to the whole thing?
And when Bunger comes into play, you know, things are going to get real serious.
And when Bunger comes into play, and Doom Eternal kind of adds angels, and that's why I have a problem with Doom Eternal. Because Doom Eternal does a lot to try and personify Doom Guy in more ways, and like Doom Eternal actually has Doom Guy say, like, he doesn't say words, but he's like, murder, rip and tear at one point.
No.
And I'm like, okay, I know what we're trying to do here. And like, I was kind of interested in the story and like seeing what was happening to it. But as soon as you try and like personify Doom Guy, you've kind of missed the point of Doom in a lot of ways. I have a lot more thoughts I can get into about Doom Eternal, but I really do not want to spoil the game, other than to say that Marauders are an interesting mechanic that was poorly implemented, and I think that they fucking suck, and I want them out of the game because it slows the game pace to a crawl, and that is upsetting when Doom Eternal is so much about moving faster and working well. And I know that there are ways around it, and I know that you can work around it to like beat them quicker and whatnot, but that is not like the intention of the developer was clearly to make you stop and think and basically play a game of chicken with these Marauders, which just stops the game absolutely fucking dead, and that eats shit. And that's why Marauders suck, despite the fact that it's a good game otherwise, and why I stopped playing Doom Eternal, because I wanted to see it through the end, but I got to a point where they're a Marauder that I just couldn't deal with because there was too much else going on with it, and it sucked and I hated it.
Go off, King.
I did. What else do you want from me?
I don't know. I'm enjoying this Daddy Doom lore lecture. What else you got for me?
Something that just kind of annoyed me is that like I do not recognize the names of any of the other scientists that they had to deal with in Doom, the movie, not the game. They have Carmack, they have John Carmack represented, but they don't have anyone else who is like fundamental to the creation of Doom in any way, shape, or form. Like at one point, I was expecting them to pull up like a name tag and it to be like McGee, as in American McGee, who is a fairly famous developer that came off the heels of Doom, and like other people who developed Doom, and I did not recognize a single name in there otherwise. So that was just a missed opportunity.
Carmack stealing all the credit once again.
That is not John Carmack at all, though. John Carmack did not care about credit. John Carmack, last I heard, is just like out launching rockets for no fucking reason other than because he wants to. Like, John Carmack does not care.
What a programmer, Chad.
Yeah, the dude doesn't give a shit.
I wasn't trying to insinuate that, like, you know, he's like, you know, correcting the narrative or whatever, like, or like corrupting the narrative. But yeah, like John Carmack definitely does get the lion's share of the credit for one reason or another. Like, I think he's the most prominent name that people would know.
Well, John Romero is huge too, and like it feels like this should be populated by John Romero, not John Carmack. Although I suppose John Carmack was more of the scientist of the group, so it does kind of make sense in that way. But like, I don't feel like he would give a shit about being in this Doom movie.
Well, because I think the other thing too, I think what kind of makes, like, amongst the laymen, like, he asked, like, oh, who is the creator of Doom? I think a lot of people's gut would be Carmack. I think a lot of that does have to do with Daikatana, actually, that I feel like Romero's reputation took a big hit, fairly or otherwise, and I think that, like, especially around the time this would have been made, we would have been fresh off of, like, the Daikatana controversies, like, relatively so. So I think it's probably just a matter of, like, I think eventually in the public consciousness, poor John Romero got more associated with, like, John Romero's gonna make you his bitch and Daikatana more than anything else, which is a tragedy.
That is fair. I do think that there is a level of, because we are somewhat aware of the industry, we assume that people recognize John Carmack more. I personally recognize John Romero more than John Carmack. I mean, even today, if you said John Romero versus John Carmack, I'd be like, okay, I'm more familiar with Romero just because he's more of a household name, which I think is what makes the use of Carmack over Romero so weird. Even then, like, I think that if you are aware of the industry and like what happened with Daikatana, you might be more like, okay, maybe Carmack, had more of a say in Doom. It was a fairly equitable split, near as I can tell, for what it's worth. But I think Romero is just more of like name a game developer to people. They'd be like, I don't know, John Romero before John Carmack to your every layman.
See, I had the opposite impression, actually, and I genuinely don't know, like, if this is just my, like, warped perspective, because, like, I remember that, like, I knew John Carmack's name, like, when I was younger and, like, kind of learning about, like, game developers and game designers and stuff for the first time. Like, I knew John Carmack's name, but I only knew John Romero from, like, I had heard all the stories about Daikatana, but the thing that was missing from my perspective was that I didn't know why it was a big deal that, like, John Romero had, like, acted like a public figure or whatever, and, like, why Daikatana was a big deal. Like, whenever John Romero would come up, it was always in the context of Daikatana, and that I had to learn later that the reason people were excited in the first place is that he was one of the central figures of Doom. So I don't know. Maybe I just have a twisted perspective on this. I don't know.
It could literally just be like what you saw first in that regard. Then,
yeah.
I mean, you might be in the minority there though, because John Romero was such a public figure for so long. I mean, he was literally considered a rock star of video game development, which is something that you don't really hear about anymore. I mean, he was out there doing wild fucking things and way in the public eye, whereas Carmack was not about that life.
At me on Twitter and tell me what your I'm gonna make a fucking Twitter poll about this, because I'm genuinely curious what people's perception is.
You know what? I'm gonna beat you to that and do it on the main Horsecast feed.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I am also very curious about it. I feel like a Twitter poll is a good way of doing it. Who do you know first, Romero or Carmack? Let us know. If you want to talk to me about Blaseball, at me at Sean_McKinda on Twitter. I will also talk to you about One Piece. I am currently on Fishman Island, that arc. So I'm wrapping that up right now, actually. That's where I'm at. Don't spoil things for me.
Yeah, I'm Jackson Keller, at Jackson J. Keller. I've been tweeting about Bugs Snacks as usual, but I'm also doing creative writing lessons over on my Twitch channel, also at Jackson J. Keller, and I've been uploading the clips to YouTube. It's a fun time. I'm technically qualified to talk about writing, in theory. I have a degree.
And that's all it takes. Somebody gave this buffoon a piece of paper, and now he's sitting out here being like, I know how to talk about writing.
Someone did just give this buffoon a piece of paper. It literally was just printed on, like, computer paper, too. Like, it wasn't even, like, fancy paper.
Go vote in our poll at BADH_cast. It's also where we tweet about updates on the episode and everything along those lines. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. It is paused currently and probably will be for the foreseeable future. I don't know whether you can access it in any way, shape, or form right now, but hey, maybe you can. Thanks as always towards the highest use of our theme song is Suicide, Alter Takeoff of the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. Buy their music, stream their music, support them on Bandcamp, whatever you got to do. Also, thanks to 25yearslaterstate.com. There's a little button of us in the corner that you should absolutely go click on. But while you're there, you should definitely see what else they're writing about. There's a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing that you should absolutely read. Next week, we're talking about Monk and Monk Skull Island.
So he's finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. So put your hands together if you want to clap as we take you through this monk rap.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go